all leaders, I think, deal with anxiety. And you said you went to school on how to cope with your anxiety. What would be the single biggest thing you learned on how to deal with anxiety?
I'd like to answer that in two ways. Um, I think what most people would like me to talk about are like some skills they could practice so they could work a little bit better with their anxiety. And I'm super happy to talk about a handful of practices and skills that were material for me. But the biggest one, to answer your question, is I had to decouple the performative part of me. I had to decouple what I do with who I am. And I was so intertwined and enmeshed in my sense of identity and sense of self that I am what I do. And it's evidenced by simple little language like, you know, oh, I'm a athlete, or I'm a executive, or I am a parent, I am a fill in the blank. And so when the thing that you do is the defining characteristic of how you describe yourself, it gets really, 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 really tricky because your entire identity is always at stake when you are expected to perform, or you are expected to be a certain way relative to the title that you gave yourself or that you hold. And that it's called performance-based identity. I didn't realize this. This is a real thing, especially in Western culture, that is one of the greatest constrictors of people getting free, of people living what we would determine is a quote unquote great life, is that to move from a performance-based identity to a purpose-based identity. That travel from performance to purpose is one of the great unlocks that I've seen across world-class athletes and executives and humans in every walk of life. Like when you wrestle down one of the big questions in your life, why am I here? What am I doing here? What is my purpose? We can exhale a little bit more when we get a little bit more clarity on what that is.
How do you, I think you're getting a really good point here because people have purpose. It takes them to a higher level, gives them a noble cause. How do you get to that purpose? People struggle with that. People, these little pat phrases, do what you love, et cetera, et cetera. All that sounds great. And a lot of that does help you drive towards what your purpose might be. But, what have you found to be really a key to unlocking the purpose that you would have in your life?
What I've done in trying to figure that very question out is I studied the religions, I studied the philosophical positions, and I studied like cultural things like ikigai and whatnot. And what I found is some of the more modern overlapping concepts are, first, we work from what are your core values? Like, what are the most important values that matter to you? And you just write those words down. And I'm pretty simple. I can hold in my memory at least 3, maybe 5. Okay. But sift them down to the ones that really matter to you. And then you express how you express those values. For example, and I'm going to ladder this up to something that's going to help with purpose. It starts with values, then it goes to first principles. The example of a first principle is, let's say my value is honesty. The way I use honesty could be honesty at all costs. It could be brutal honesty, or it could be honesty with compassion. It could be honesty when a person's available to it. So there's a way that I take the value and make it so for me. That's called a first principle. And then what rests on the values and the first principles is eventually you get to clarity of a personal philosophy. Okay, so a personal philosophy is this idea about like, what are the most important principles that guide my thoughts, words, and actions? And it's a sentence or two that is my personal philosophy. It's unique to you. And you can borrow it from Gandhi, Buddha, Jesus, Confucius. You could borrow those. They all have values and first principles and personal philosophies about life. They've done that for themselves. Now, if you want to feel like, no, I want my own, cool. You will be influenced by a lot of sources. And I just don't want to, again, escape from the reality of how important these radical teachings have been for 9 billion people on our planet. And then what comes up from personal philosophy is a compelling vision that you hold for yourself. What is in the most crystallized way, how can you use your imagination to see a compelling future? So that's your vision. Let me say it again. Values to first principles to personal philosophy to vision. And then once you have those stacked together, it's the sum of those that inform what your purpose is. And so now purpose rests on three legs. The first is nobody can give you your purpose. It has to matter to you. So it has first leg, personal meaning. It matters to you. Second leg is that it has to be bigger than you. Okay, it doesn't need to be, saving the water issue across the planet, like as big as it gets. It does not need to be saving children in said country. It can be. It just has to be bigger than you, like being a great mom or dad for my family. But it's just bigger than you. And the third leg of the stool, David, is that you can't solve it today. There's a horizon to it. It's out in front of you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a critical thing. And, I think when your life is filled with a noble cause, I think it takes you to a whole different plane in terms of how you will perform. And you've become this renowned performance psychologist. What took you to that path?
I'll go back to the pain as an origin story for most of us is that, I was super unsettled and anxious as we described, but I needed this science to show up in my life. I was a young competitor, good little surfer, growing up on the West Coast, that was my sport of choice. And it makes sense, doesn't it? I didn't like adults yelling at me. I liked Mother Nature teaching me. So surfing was this, great kind of expression playground for me. And there's two types of surfing, David. There's one part of surfing is called core surfing. And the other type of surfing is competitive surfing. And it's like oil and water. The two do not mix. Core surfing is put yourself in a heavy position. Put yourself in the most critical part of a heavy wave. And when you survive that, you don't come out of that experience asking anyone, did you see it? Did anyone get a picture? Look, that was amazing. Let me tell you about it. That was all shunned. So the mandate in core surfing was put yourself in the situation that is as heavy and critical as you can tolerate. Don't risk your life in stupid ways, but put yourself in those situations to earn the right to know, to earn the knowing of what it takes, of what you need to build, of what it feels like. And that is the reward. Do not look around to see if anyone saw you. And it was awesome. I fell so at home with that culture, but I also wanted to compete. Now in the competition, I was the weird kettle here. I wanted to go test myself against other people that were really skilled. Now in competitive surfing, you've got people on the beach that are judging, critiquing, jeering, celebrating, so there's this whole other world out there. I was a good little surfer, not great, but in competition moments, David, I was a mess. So it's this beautiful condition out. I'm 15 years old, literally wet behind my ears. It's perfect conditions out in the Pacific Ocean. 7:30 in the morning. There's only 3 people out with these beautiful conditions because that's how many people are in the heat. And there was a competitor that paddled by me. And he says, Gervais, and he was about 4 or 5 years older than me. He says, Gervais, I surf with you almost every day. He says, I just got to tell you, you got to stop worrying about all the things that could go wrong. You're a mess out here. And I thought to myself, how does he know? Like, that's exactly what's happening. He paddled off. He beat me in the competition, like he didn't leave me in a better way. And instantly I thought, no, this is a 15-year-old mind. My physical body didn't change from yesterday. My technical skills didn't change from yesterday. The only thing that changed was how I'm thinking. What is that? So this is like early 1980s. What is that? What is this thing on the mind? And I knew that I couldn't say anything about it because you remember at that time, David, if you talk about the mind, you were kind of weak. You're a weirdo. You got something wrong with you. Like my dad wasn't having any of that. And so I didn't know what to do. So I privately, quietly tried to figure it out. And then I found this thing called the science of excellence, the psychology of excellence. It's this small little field that was just getting going. And I thought, these are my people. So I took it as far as I could go, as far as I possibly could go.